Washington Commanders are back from their bye week, and could some big changes be on the way on both offense and defense as we head down the home stretch of the 2025 NFL season for the Burgundy and Gold? We're going to be talking about some potential changes that could be just around the corner for this football team on today's edition of the Commanders Report. But before we get into the content today, kick us off down there in the comments section by answering this question. What's a big change you would implement with the Washington Commanders after the bye week? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Give me your ideas. And with that, let's get into today's content. First, let's start with the Washington Commanders offense, okay? Because obviously Kliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, in his second year here in Washington, it's been a downgrade. It's been a step back as a unit, but obviously Terry McLaurin's been injured for a large portion of the season, and Jayden Daniels has been injured for a large portion of the season, and there's been a bunch of other injuries that have affected this offense as well. And, considering the circumstances, this is certainly the side of the ball that has at least been competent, all right? They're right around league average and right around top 10 in a lot of different key areas. They're actually sixth in success rate right now, which is definitely impressive given the fact that they haven't had their star quarterback or their star number one receiver for most of this year. They're number 2 in red zone percentage, so Kliff is still in his bag, getting this team into the end zone. When they do get into the red area, I would say that they probably turn the ball over a little bit too much, and they certainly haven't scored enough points. They're not even ranking in the top 20 in points this season as a football team in terms of points per game. But this, this side of the ball hasn't necessarily been the big issue, even though this team can certainly, in this side of the ball, can get better down the stretch. And I've got 4 things that could be coming here in the second half of the season that could help maybe turn some things around on the offensive side of the ball and get this team playing and this offense playing the way that we're used to seeing them play. Number 1, play Jayden Daniels when he gets back to 100%. All right. Now, Jayden claims, and he said a couple days ago when he was FaceTiming with his best friend Brandon Ayuk, that he plans on playing this week on Sunday Night Football versus the Denver Broncos. But unfortunately, it kind of seems like the Commanders have different plans there, as Ian Rappaport reported earlier today, actually, saying the Commanders quarterback Jayden Daniels was evaluated coming out of Washington's bye, and sources say this Sunday's game against the Broncos is a long shot, but Daniels will return to practice this week, progress from his dislocated elbow. And listen, man, I think that the right strategy for the Washington Commanders when it comes to handling this injury with Jayden Daniels is that if he's not 100%, if there's injury risk, if he's not 100% ready to go and comfortable and healthy, I don't think he should play. And I think, honestly, even if he wants to play, the team should protect him and keep him out, even if he's pushing to play. You got to get him back to 100%, plain and simply. Obviously, there's no fractures and there's no real ligament damage in his elbow, which is terrific news. So he should be able to come back pretty soon, actually. But until he's back 100%, you see stuff in practice where it's like, okay, Jayden Daniels is all the way back. He should not play in any game for the Washington Commanders the rest of the season because, frankly, the season is over, so there's no need to rush this. But when he's good and when he does get to that 100% threshold and he is 100% ready to go, you got to protect him, obviously. You probably don't run him as much as you usually do. You try and give him more true drop-back passing, full field progression reads, and you try and develop him as a passer, not as a rusher, because we already know what he can do in that regard. But you let him play, all right? You see what he can do. You see what you can put on his plate, what he can handle, and then also having the better quarterback out there. And yes, Jayden Daniels is better than Marcus Mariota. I love Marcus as a backup, but having the better quarterback out there will allow you to evaluate the rest of the offense, with a more clearer mind heading into the 2026 offseason. So you definitely want to see some good things from Jayden Daniels down the stretch. So you have some, you have some hope and you have some good feelings about this offense heading into 2026. Also, honestly, with Jayden probably not playing this week against the Broncos, it would be really nice to get just Terry McLaurin back. Marcus Mariota is more than functional at quarterback, but honestly, I think Terry McLaurin might be even more important to the Commanders offense than Jayden Daniels is, because there's not as big of a drop-off at quarterback with Marcus Mariota as there is at the receiver position when you lose Terry McLaurin. I mean, Deebo Samuel is your number 2 2 receiver. And for what he is, he's a good receiver, but he's not able to replace Terry McLaurin's role in this offense as the true number one guy, the guy that's tasked with routing guys up one-on-one in man coverage, the guy that's tasked with making tough catches down the sideline and over the middle, the guy gets tasked with winning over the top. I mean, they asked Terry McLaurin to really be, the main piece in this Commanders passing attack, and there's really nobody else in this wide receiver room that is capable of filling that role, and we've seen that with some of the struggles that this team has had throwing the ball down the field when Terry McLaurin has been out of the lineup, and getting him back should open up the rest of the offense. It should open up, the run game. It should open up, the screen game a little bit more. It should open up the underneath passing game and the intermediate game with Zach Ertz. And yes, Deebo Samuel. I mean, you can let Deebo be Deebo, especially when Terry McLaurin gets back. And I thought Kliff did a good job of this, in Madrid a couple weeks ago against the Dolphins. They gave Deebo a lot of looks on screens, and they got blockers in front of him, and they let Deebo be the yak monster that he frankly still is at this point in his NFL career. Now, if you're going to ask him to route people up in man coverage, if you're going to ask him to beat double teams and do all this different stuff Terry's capable of doing, like you're going to be disappointed with the results that you're going to get from Deebo Samuel. But the reason why they brought in Deebo is because he's one of the better gadget receivers in the league still, and he can still do that. So that's exactly how this team should use him. Then the final offensive change that could be coming, and we actually saw a little sneak peek of this in Madrid, is jumbo personnel packages. And if you're unfamiliar what a jumbo personnel package is, it's when you put that sixth offensive lineman, that extra offensive lineman, out there on the field. There's been a ton of teams that have been doing this all throughout the NFL season. The Steelers, the Eagles, the Dolphins have been, dabbling in it as well. Now the Commanders, just before the bye week in the Madrid game, started using Brandon Coleman as that sixth offensive lineman, and the run game took a little bit of a jump. I thought that the run game with Chris Rodriguez Jr. looked pretty decent that game against the Miami Dolphins. So I want to see Kliff Kingsbury continue to run that jumbo personnel package as the season goes on to see if it's something that it can be something that can be implemented in the long-term strategy on offense here in Washington. So coming up here on the Commanders Report, some suggested changes to the Commanders defense. You're not going to want to miss some of these changes that I'm going to suggest here at the end of today's show. But first, get down there in the comment section for today's pinned question and answer this. Is Kliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator for the Commanders, doing a good job this year? Simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. I think he's doing a pretty good job given the circumstances, but let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Ridge. And while I tell you about Ridge today, simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. Now, are you guys tired of your bulky wallet taking up space in your pockets? Then check out today's sponsor, Ridge. The Ridge wallet's unique, slim, and modern design holds up to 12 cards and is made with premium materials such as aluminum, titanium, and carbon fiber to keep your stuff safe while creating an unflattering without creating an unflattering bulge in your pocket. With over 100,000 five-star reviews, the quality of the Ridge wallet speaks for itself, and it's also super customizable with over 50 colors, team branding, and AirTag attachment options to customize your Ridge wallet to your own needs. Also, Ridge isn't just about wallets, guys. They also create premium everyday carry essentials like key cases, suitcases, and rings, all built with the same sleek, durable design. And no matter what you pick, Ridge has free shipping, a 99-day risk-free trial, and a lifetime warranty on all of their products. And just to show you guys that I actually use and love Ridge's products, I actually brought my Ridge wallet with me here today. I really love the slim design, man. I used to have a really bulky leather wallet that would kind of create kind of a weird bulge, whenever you would wear, jeans or any sort of pants. And I just wanted something that was a little bit more modern, a little bit more sleek, and a little bit more thin. And Ridge just brought all that to the table for me. So for limited time only, our listeners can get 10% off at Ridge by using code CHAT at checkout. Just head on over to ridge.com and use code CHAT, and you're all set. After your purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. A big thank you to Ridge for sponsoring today's edition of the Commanders Report. So now moving on to some defensive changes that we could see coming out of the bye week. Could they potentially look to rotate Javon Kinlaw in at defensive end, especially when it comes to early downs? All right. Right now, the Commanders having a really tough time setting the edge versus the run game. And because Bobby Wagner can't run anymore, if they can get outside of that edge and get to the perimeter, there's no linebackers that are going to be able to get to that running back. And that's been a big issue for the Commanders, rushing rushing defense so far this year. So if you're having trouble setting the edge, how about you go and get a 320-pound athletic freak that can move really fluidly for a guy of that size to play defensive end? I think that it's an interesting idea. They did dabble with the idea in training camp this year. They haven't done it a whole lot in games, but Kinlaw is very athletic, and he could potentially even pull this off at 320 pounds. Now, a potential early down lineup here that we could see for the Washington Commanders here this season, coming out of the bye week, it could look something like this, where you got Jacob Martin, who's played some pretty good ball for the Washington Commanders this year on the edge. Then you got Deron Payne, and Eddie Goldman's actually played some good football as a true nose tackle run-stuffing type. And then you could put Javon Kinlaw on the other edge there. And that way, rushing teams and teams that are trying to run the football on the Commanders don't have a very obvious side that they can run the football to on the perimeter. Javon Kinlaw might be somebody that could be really menacing as somebody that lines up on the edge for the Washington Commanders, especially on those early downs. And, I would only consider this on early downs because, Von Miller, I think, is probably more of that true rotational pass rusher type of guy. And also, on pass downs, I want Javon on the interior so that he can be his most disruptive self and affect the pocket. So this is how I would line up versus the pass, where you have Jacob Martin, who I think has earned an every down starting role for the Washington Commanders this year. You keep Deron Payne out there, of course. Javon Kinlaw kicks inside, and then you have Von Miller play the other defensive end spot when it's an obvious passing down situation. So I think that would probably help some of the defensive line issues, particularly in run defense on early downs, that we have seen from the Washington Commanders this year. I think that's probably the best way to move forward with the current pieces in the Commanders' defensive line. Then, it does appear that we're going to get some reinforcements at defensive end, so it's going to be interesting to see how Dan Quinn implements, some of these guys that are coming off of injury and are, fully ramped up after signing in free agency. DeMarcus Walker and Drake Jackson, both expected to be back potentially this week versus the Denver Broncos. Walker would be making his Commanders debut. I mean, as long as you're getting Preston Smith off the football field, I think it's probably a plus for the Washington Commanders. DeMarcus has been a very productive player in this league for a long time. He has been, somebody that's gotten over 25 sacks in his NFL career. And Drake Jackson is somebody with some upside. He's still pretty darn young, so if he plays well down the stretch, he could be somebody that this team can bring back and potentially be somebody that could be in the rotation long term. But now we get to the second level of the defense, and I would suggest to Dan Quinn to bench Bobby Wagner. Okay, you've had this bye week to kind of think about it, and I just think at this point, I think it's time to really focus on the future. And Bobby Wagner will not be back in 2026, but Jordan McGee has a chance to be a bona fide starter on the second level here in Washington next year. He's shown some good things in coverage. He's made some nice open field tackles. He's way more athletic than Bobby Wagner is at this point in time, and he should be the full-time green dot for the Washington Commanders. He's got a partial time green dot. Whenever Bobby Wagner's off the field, McGee is the one relaying plays. In my opinion, he should be taking on that full-blown responsibility at this point and only have Bobby Wagner in uniform pretty much in case McGee gets injured. And then, now we get to the secondary here, and there's some interesting things that the Commanders could try out to finish out the rest of this regular season. Personally, I would move Quan Martin out of the safety position where he's played here in the Dan Quinn defense over the last 2 years and move him into the slot where he played in college. He was one of the top slot corners in the entire country at Illinois just a few years ago, and he was one of the top slot cornerback prospects coming out of the Fighting Illini when Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio drafted him a few years back. So safety is a tough transition for anybody. It's a completely different position. There's been some guys like Kirby Joseph, for example, of the Detroit Lions that have done a really good job transitioning to that safety position. Commanders thought that Quan Martin was going to be that next success story, moving from slot corner to safety. Unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case. Quan's been terrible in coverage. He's got, his instincts out there in zone coverage aren't the best. He takes bad angles. He's not very good as a run defender or as a tackler either. So I'm hoping that potentially a move inside there to the slot could make him more comfortable and maybe make him a serviceable player, so you don't have to throw out, a former or early draft pick of this organization, still a very young player. It's certainly the case that Mikey Sainristro's not a nickel back in the modern day National Football League, and the Commanders had to learn that the hard way. Now Mikey's playing on the outside, and he's playing a lot better. Maybe the same thing could be said for Quan Martin. Maybe he moves into the slot and he plays really well there the rest of the season, and he can be the long-term answer at that position, so the Commanders don't have to waste money or draft capital to address that position next offseason. So that's something that I would definitely do. Now with Quan Martin moving out of safety, that means that I would play Darnell Savage and Will Harris at safety moving forward. And yes, Will Harris is expected to be back this week for Sunday Night Football versus the Broncos. This was confirmed by head coach Dan Quinn today in his early week press conference, and he says he's quote-unquote optimistic Harris will return this week coming off of that a fibula injury that he suffered earlier this season. They brought him in to be this team's strong safety. He's another guy that could potentially play in the slot as well. He's got that slot versatility. So it's going to be interesting to see how they put the puzzle pieces together here. I'm sure Coach Quinn and the defensive coaching staff have really rattled their brains to try and find some solutions in the secondary over the bye week, and I'm really intrigued to see what they do. But I think another potential solution that they could have in the secondary is play more dime. And, especially when your linebacker play is as bad as it is for the Washington Commanders, I think dime is something that would work really well for the Washington Commanders, and getting that extra safety out there. Dan Quinn has been somebody that's used dime packages a lot throughout his coaching career, and then I would put Jeremy Reeves in as that dime backer. So you got Darnell Savage and you got Will Harris there as your two starting safeties, and then if you kind of play a lot out of dime, you can have Jeremy Reeves be that kind of heat-seeking missile that can just go out and hit people as hard as they possibly can in those intermediate zones. So here's the way that the potential dime package could look. Jordan McGee would be the only linebacker on the field in this particular formation. You got Jacob Martin, Deron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, and then probably Von Miller or maybe even Frankie Louvu. Put him at edge rusher. I've suggested that a number of times if you're going to be going to this kind of lighter dime package and it's a heavy pass situation. I would put Frankie Louvu out there actually over Von Miller. But then you've got Jeremy Reeves playing the dime. You got Mikey as the number one corner on the outside. Jonathan Jones is the other starter on the outside. Quan Martin in the slot. Then you got Darnell Savage and Will Harris as the two other safeties there. I think that this is a lineup that could potentially work for the Washington Commanders on pass-heavy downs in particular. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Dan Quinn has up his sleeve this week against the Broncos, and then also the rest of this season, because with the lack of talent, with all the injuries to this side of the ball, you're definitely going to have to get creative over the final stretch of this season if you want to have any sort of success on the defensive side of the ball. All right, that's going to be it for today's edition of the Commanders Report by Chat Sports. Make sure you type those real ones down there in the comment section if you made it to the end of today's show. If you make it to the end of our videos, guys, it really does help out the YouTube algorithm, because if you make it to the end, YouTube kind of sees that and they're like, oh, this person really liked this Commanders video, so I'm going to suggest it to other Commanders fans. So we really do appreciate all the people that make it to the end of our shows, guys. So if you're one of those people, type those real ones in the comment section. We'll give you guys some love. And of course, make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you love the Washington Commanders, you want daily coverage of this football team, and we're also going to be going live for Sunday Night Football on Sunday night against the Broncos. Whether the Commanders get absolutely killed or whether they can pull off a surprising upset, we're going to be here covering it for you guys. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, hail to the Commanders.